Experienced lover decoded love, experimented with boundaries, and finally put an end to a toxic relationship, finding empowerment and an exit. In my relationship experience with my GF, we were on and off for 5 years and cycled back over a dozen times. I've been hit with blind-sided discards throughout the years. Usually the discards happened when I thought things were at their best in the relationship and we were having our most closest and intimate times together. I loved her, but my heart had hardened over the years and it morphed into a challenge and experiment for me, as I am very interested in human psychology. The last 3 breakups were all initiated by me after I saw set boundaries bulldozed through by her. In the past, I would have lingered and waited for the axe to fall, not believing she would or could actually leave. Now, armed with all this hard-learned experience, I prepared and waited for her next hoover. Sure enough, she came back each time. Sometimes after much more added betrayal. Sometimes she would monkey branch. She would never admit to it, but I would usually find out months or years after the fact. She was great at keeping secrets and sneaking around and telling lies. This last time was more of an experiment for me. Her trigger after the love bombing stage and first discard was sexual intimacy, which invoked emotional intimacy. Usually right after an intimate encounter, she would either start a nonsensical fight and use my reaction as a reason to leave, or would just disappear and ghost. I've struggled with, does she only have an avoidant attachment style, or is there a cluster B disorder also at play? I really think it is BPD with covert NPD traits combined with an avoidant attachment style, forming a mental trifecta, a relationship disaster. I knew this last time wouldn't work. A zebra can't change its stripes. She contacted me again to get back together again. I played hard to get, trying to decide if I really wanted this or not. I demanded numerous boundaries be agreed to before I would agree trying again. I pushed her so far away, I thought she might just say never mind, but when I saw her reaching her limit, I relented and accepted her back with many boundaries in place. I told myself if these were broke I was done and I would leave. One important boundary was being blocked on social media. She would always keep me blocked on FB and other platforms while we were in a relationship. I felt it was to shield her harem from knowing about me and me knowing about them and what she was doing. She kept other exes as friends on FB and actually went back to him after we broke up on 2 occasions. I often wondered if we put off having sex, could we build a stronger foundation and have a longer lasting relationship? I also didn't want physical intimacy to cloud my judgment and give me false feelings of love. So we both decided to not be intimate right away and just date and put an emphasis on building a friendship and getting close without sex. Things were great in the beginning. She was trying hard. She opened up in ways I had always wanted. Some of those were because of boundaries I set in the beginning. I got to meet her family and friends. I saw a lot of the same cluster B behaviors in others close to her and her family members, from suicide to serial cheating, multiple and short-lived relationships, etc. Slowly I could see the mental fatigue on her face. She began struggling about 2 months in. We decided to plan a weekend getaway and be intimate. I put down deposits on an Airbnb and made plans. She started an argument the week of the trip. Her issue was that I offered to bring her to my gym as a guest so we could do something healthy together and bond. She just thought that was the worst idea ever. During the argument she also told me she could be talking to someone else instead. She then kicked me out of her house. I thought that was the end of the experiment. In the past, any conflict, no matter how mild, would have been reason enough for her to break up. Lo and behold, I was truly surprised. I woke up to a good morning text from her apologizing, saying she was not running away and I was her person and she loved me. She stated she still didn't feel comfortable going on the trip. I lost deposits. I later questioned her about who she was referring to she could be talking to instead. She said she never could have said that, as it would have been mean to say. Fast forward approximately 2 months later, the old argument about the gym was brought up again by her. It didn't get to the same level of being kicked out of her house. I kept my cool and just grey rocked her and didn't react. I just affirmed her and said okay. It seemed to give her some relief and not escalate things. We decided to plan a weekend at a casino where we would spend the night. This went off without a hitch. We had a great time and we were very intimate and had great sex. Afterwards, laying in bed enjoying the afterglow, she commented this was never our problem. I asked what was our problem. She said it was her running away. She promised to never do that again. The next day we went to her parents' house for Sunday dinner. Things were great. She seemed so in love with me. I was elated. We were walking into her parents' side entrance when I noticed how happy she was and I commented, someone looks like they are in love. She turned around and looked at me with the strangest face. Almost like fear. I was taken aback but didn't say anything as we were walking into her parents' house and then greeted everyone. It was like a switch had just flipped. She became distant and quiet. I didn't see her again until the following Sunday. She gave excuses about having to work a night shift that was at first going to alternate every other day to nightly. At the end of the week she invited back to her parents' house for dinner. She still texted, but I didn't receive any phone calls and the texts contained less affectionate terms and only offered up I loves yous only after I did first. While at her parents' house her mother asked if I was going to her birthday party the next night at a restaurant. I said I would love to, but I didn't know anything about it. She gave her mom a WTF look and then said let's see how he acts first. Me and her mother both looked at each other and laughed. The next night I show up at her house to pick her and her teenage daughter up, who had been committed for attempting suicide in the past, for the purpose of going to her mother's b-day party. 2 days in the future was Valentine's Day. I asked what restaurant would she like to go to. She was like, I don't want to go out, and gave a reason as the restaurants would be too busy, but after my persistent questioning she offered possibly a lunch instead and said she would let me know. I dropped it as she was getting visibly angered. This was totally out of character because she always liked going out to busy places where live music and beer was had. I said okay and we continued on to the party. We were at a restaurant and normally she sits right beside me thigh to thigh and she would keep a hand on my leg. That night she sat at least a foot apart from me and never touched me the whole night. We barely even spoke. Every time I tried she was dismissive. After dinner we went back to her house and she sat me down to tell me that she felt pressured to see me after work as she missed going to stores and felt rushed to get home to see me. I didn't react and just offered a compromise and said I understood. How about we schedule a date night then? She never responded and just dropped it. She then brought up the gym argument again. I didn't respond to it. I told her I was her safe place and to just relax. My head was swimming with thoughts of here we go again. I leave soon after her telling me she was tired and I got my peck on the cheek and left early. I did not receive a good night text or ask if I made it home safely. I sent a good night message and fell asleep. The next morning I wake to no messages, which was very abnormal. I normally get good morning messages from her and I love yous every day. I sent my normal messages and she responds back saying she needed that. But nothing more additional. I go through my day and get nothing else from her. Normally she sends texts all day long. Towards 4 p.m. I send a text from a gym and a selfie saying hi, I love you. She hearted the photo and said she was going to her mom's house and sent me a selfie of her. She was all dressed up and didn't look like she was just going to her mom's. I was hoping to get an invite to come over. Nothing more came from her. I asked about her daughter as she was dealing with possible COVID symptoms and I got nothing in response. I didn't feel like going home so I went to the movies by myself. Sitting there I was thinking, why am I putting up with this? I'm really not happy. I feel so alone. I go to bed and send my normal good night texts. I wake up in the morning and I did not receive any texts. I decided to try calling her and all my calls were forwarded. I then check her Facebook and now see that I am blocked. I remembered the boundaries I set and the purpose of the boundaries. The purpose was to respect myself and not be used by her again. I did not want to be hurt and abused by her again. With so many discards done in the past by her, I felt the discard was in full swing. I felt she was possibly cheating and the pushback was her trying to create space to water a new infatuation. She had recently transferred to a new department within her company and was promoted and allowed to select people she wanted for her office. My gut was telling me she was talking to someone at work, which would explain the recent late night hours. I decided I needed to end the relationship. I sent her a breakup text as she always ended it with me that way. Before that happened to me so many times, I never have chosen to break up over text. But it did allow me to spell out everything I saw and what I felt. It contained my closure and reasoning in an attempt to make my own closure for myself because I knew she would not give any closure and also to hold her accountable. I ended the breakup text with an open door and said, if I'm wrong please explain. I will listen. Her response was, wow, you said enough. I'm done. I replied, yep, I know. Her mother reached out and apologized and expressed regret. I told her everything. I felt vindicated. She said her and her husband thought so highly of me and hoped it would have worked. She did not know if her daughter was seeing anyone else. We have since stopped communicating, but we remain friends on FB. I credit the lack of sexual intimacy as the reason I was able to look at the relationship with sober eyes and step away when I saw the signs. The signs were abuse. They truly were. If you love a person you would never ask for space and give such a silly reason. Sex would have produced false feelings of love. I was able to look at the relationship objectively and I was actually not happy. My needs weren't being met. I felt so drained and unseen. I didn't feel loved. She loved the way I loved her, but it wasn't reciprocated. I felt the need, perhaps due to the trauma bond and the perceived betrayal, to learn if in fact she had monkey branched in order to help me move away from her permanently. I reached out to another family member and the ex she monkey branched to in the past. I explained the above information and I ended up not receiving any new information. Both told her I had reached out and her ex blocked me. My ex then sent me an email demanding I stop contacting her family and friends, and furthermore she would be filing a protection order. I never received the order. My only regrets was reaching out to her family and her ex. It just gave her a reason to smear me and to tell everyone I'm a nutty person. I can't say why I'm 100% Hoover proof at the moment, but I have started dating again. I don't think she will come back again because I believe she feels I can't be used anymore, and furthermore I'm willing to reveal her bad deeds to her family and friends. I think she will choose to move on to a fresh target who does not know her and what she is capable of doing. The text narrates a tumultuous relationship characterized by cycles of breakup and reconciliation. Despite the emotional roller coaster, the narrator's growing awareness of their partner's manipulative behavior prompts them to set boundaries and reevaluate the relationship. They recognize patterns of discard and manipulation, leading them to question their partner's attachment style and potential personality disorders. As the relationship progresses, the narrator becomes more introspective, questioning the authenticity of their partner's affection and their own happiness within the relationship. They experiment with withholding physical intimacy to gain clarity and perspective, ultimately realizing that their needs are not being met and that they feel drained and unseen. Despite attempts to salvage the relationship, the narrator reaches a breaking point when confronted with their partner's dismissive behavior and perceived infidelity. The narrator's decision to end the relationship is driven by a desire to reclaim their self-respect and protect themselves from further emotional abuse. By reflecting on their experiences and seeking closure, they begin the healing process and cautiously navigate the possibility of future relationships. Though still grappling with the aftermath of their breakup, they express a newfound sense of empowerment and a determination to prioritize their own well-being moving forward. Update 1. Most people seem to have gotten hung up on the metaphor experiment I chose to explain a new strategy me and my ex both agreed to at the beginning of the new attempt. First, trying again required more than just bumbling around in the dark. We both wanted it to work and felt the strategy of not jumping in the sack right away was a good idea to help build a solid foundation first. It was a logical conclusion and just another stab at seeing if we could make the relationship work. The experiment was conceived together and agreed upon together. There was no manipulation or coercion and definitely no deception. She in fact came to me wanting to try again. She was never forced or tricked. All my cards were always out in the open as trust was a core issue. Hers was trusting anyone, mine was trusting her. Secondly, I am educated in the sciences and have worked in a science field for years designing and implementing experiments. So that term was well in my wheelhouse. I tend to approach things that don't work with logic and problem-solving skills and prefer to methodically approach a problem. Since this had been going on for years, off course I prepared myself by reading and studying books and watched hours of YouTube by professionals explaining the disorder and its impacts on both sides of the equation. That's how I learned and became familiar with the subject matter. In the beginning I knew nothing about it. I definitely wasn't diagnosing her. Was just using known facts and available information to become well informed and be able to make a decision whether ill-conceived or not. Thirdly, most people read and offer their assumption that I must be insane, have a god complex or be narc, only because I agreed to go back so many times and give the relationship another try. My response to that is you haven't walked in my shoes. I loved her and I felt she loved me. Sure, from an outside perspective anyone who willingly submits themselves to that type of behavior in a relationship must be crazy and I haven't even explained the half of it. I just went into what occurred in this last cycle. That's just a lazy ignorant response based on so little facts or evidence. It's very common for kids with bad behavior to be labeled by psychologists with a sundry of alphabet letters, only later when the issue or stimulus was addressed the aforementioned diagnosis was no longer relevant.